yeah, to just be respectful of everyone's time, we're gonna hop right in. So yeah, my name is Ariana Baldwin. I am the Senior Coordinator of Outreach and Partnerships at Grow Brooklyn. And before we get started, once again, just want to thank every single one of you who was able to make it tonight for taking time out of your busy schedules to sit down with us for this community education night, or this night of education. All of us on this call believe that an educated, well-informed, and properly equipped community is a community that will prosper, but sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to find the resources that you need to allow for the space of that prosperity. And we all know that tax season in the US can be a very stressful, complicated, and confusing time for many of us because there's a lot of information out there that you need to know about taxes. It can be a little overwhelming between deadlines and rules, regulations, requirements, and whatnot. You kind of are in a little bit of a state of fear, maybe, for thinking, oh, if I don't know this information, you know, you could get in trouble with the IRS. Like, there's all this fear around the IRS and all that. But that's why we thought that this is a great idea to provide this information for our community members to know that tax season doesn't need to be this daunting process. It can actually be something that when you're educated and well aware and well informed, it can be a worry-free, a stress-free, and almost easy process. So that is our hope going into this year. And that's exactly why Grow Brooklyn and Brooklyn Legal Corporation partnered together to put together this event, the Need to Know Series 2022 tax season. So being that BK Legal and Grow Brooklyn are proud to have their roots in Brooklyn, even though we do serve the greater population of New York City, we are even more proud to have 3 Brooklyn-based elected officials sponsoring and supporting this event, representing parts of Northwest Brooklyn and parts of Central Brooklyn. In New York City's 35th Council District, we have New York City Councilmember Crystal Hudson, who will be joining us for part 2 next Thursday, February 9th. Representing parts of Northwest Brooklyn and New York's 57th Assembly District, we have New York State Assemblywoman Persaud, who will be joining us for our final part on February 16th. And last but certainly not least, we have Senator Persaud, who is joining us tonight, representing Southeast Brooklyn in New York's 19th Senatorial District. And we are very, very, very grateful and appreciative and proud to be able to welcome you into this space with us and, you know, speak with the community and show your support with the community. So we want to allow for this time for you to share your thoughts with the community and any words that you would like to share with everyone out there tonight.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Ariana. I just have to make sure I correct that. I am Senator Persaud, and I represent the 19th district, but my district now, as of January 1st, now covers parts of Brooklyn and Queens. I don't want to forget my Queens part of the district. And so I'm happy that we've partnered again. It's tax season, and I'm happy that I'm partnering with Grow Brooklyn and BLS Corporate to bring this information to the community. It is extremely important that we have an educated community when it comes to tax season. Just a couple of days ago, the IRS was reminding people to file their taxes as soon as possible, because we've seen that when you delay in filing your taxes, those unscrupulous people take your information and file it for you, and you have problems. So we're encouraging everyone to take the information that you're learning in this 3-part season and ensure that you do your taxes as soon as possible. This information is to help you prepare for when you're going to have your taxes done. So again, I appreciate all of you partnering with me to educate our community on tax time. So I'm going to pass it over to you. And I appreciate also my colleagues who decided also to join in this endeavor. So it's a great team in Brooklyn. Thanks again, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Persaud. Once again, we appreciate you being here with us tonight, as well as the phenomenal work that you continue to do for Brooklynites. And of course, Queens, cannot forget Queens. Here in the community and in the Queens community, and also up in Albany, we really appreciate your work and we're very grateful for you. So I want to also take time to acknowledge our speakers who are going to be on tonight. Yeah, so we have the pleasure of welcoming our Grow Brooklyn team as well as our BK Legal team. Representing our BK Legal team, we have Samara Del Carmen, and altogether our panelists and people who are here are professionals in the tax field, our tax attorneys, experienced tax preparers. We have a bunch of people from different backgrounds also in the tax field in order to provide you with as much information, as much of a diverse perspective as possible. So tonight we're going to be covering filing requirements, important tax deadlines, and the services that are provided by the IRS Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, LITC for short, and the IRS Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, or VITA for short. But before we get started, we're working our way towards the presentation, I promise. We do want to give you a little bit of information about the other services that Grow Brooklyn and BK Legal provides, just so that that information is out there and that it can be of service to you if you need to take advantage of it and if you need these services. So yeah, Grow Brooklyn, like I said, is a Brooklyn-based nonprofit that also serves the greater population of New York City, with our mission being to enable individuals and families to grow and protect their assets in order to secure their economic futures. And we fulfill or live up to this mission by providing free tax prep, pro bono, and low-cost legal services, as well as financial counseling. Our foreclosure prevention program offers free counseling to help our community members hold on to their homes and stay in their homes. We have attorneys who can represent you in settlement conferences and negotiate a resolution, as well as counselors who will negotiate for you, talk to your lenders, and give you budgeting and documentation advice. Our Protect Your Treasure program, or as we affectionately like to call it, our PYT program for short, offers pro bono, so free ends of life and estate planning services. This includes assistance with surrogates court, as well as the preparation and execution of a living will, last will and testament, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, and other advanced directives. Additionally, this year, Grow Brooklyn is very, very proud to be one of 5 partners on the Center for New York City Neighborhoods Black Homeownership Project, Generation to Generation Estate Planning, where we are providing, again, free estate planning services to Black homeowners in Central Brooklyn, South Brooklyn, as well as the North Bronx, as a way to ensure that Black homeowners in New York City are able to keep their homes within their families and pass that down to create generational wealth, which will uplift and promote racial financial equity and equality. And finally, as a HUD certified organization, our housing and counseling / financial capabilities program offers one-on-one financial counseling for anyone, but specifically for homeowners who are looking to work towards specific goals like creating a sustainable budget, building and repairing credit history, establishing a savings over time, and preparing individuals and families to be able to navigate, and find an accessible way to navigating the home buying process. And I'm not going to go too much into detail about the free tax prep that we provide because that's a part of our presentation tonight, but we will get to that later on in the evening. And now I want to share this space with BK Legal to talk about their other services that you will definitely find helpful and informative and necessary in these communities. So yeah, Tamara.
Thank you so much, Ariana, and special thank you to our sponsor, Senator Persaud. We appreciate all you do for Brooklyn and Queens. Thank you again, and thank you for joining us. So as Ariana mentioned, my name is Samara Del Carmen. I am the Tax Clinic Director of Brooklyn Legal Services Corp-A's Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. And Brooklyn Legal Services Corp-A is a not-for-profit legal services organization that has been providing legal services for over 50 years. Brooklyn A has 3 programs under our Preserving Affordable Housing program. We represent tenants facing eviction and tenant associations whose landlords are violating the fair housing laws. Under the Community and Economic Development Program, we represent small businesses and provide lease assistance. And under the Consumer and Economic Program, we represent homeowners facing foreclosure in the state, federal, and bankruptcy courts. We assist with loan modifications and defense work. And we also represent taxpayers who have tax issues with the IRS and New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. We also recently launched a new domestic violence program where we provide legal services to domestic violence survivors, such as orders of protection, as well as child custody and support. Thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to be passing it back to Ariana.
Yes, thank you so much, Tamara. So it looks like we're finally at the part of the presentation. We're ready to get started and jump right in. So we're going to start with filing requirements, transition our way into important and key deadlines that everyone should know about tax season, and then kind of round out the evening with discussing these very vital IRS programs, VITA and LITC, talking about the services that are provided as well as the eligibility for these programs. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to kick it off to Go Brooklyn to get ready for the filing requirements content.
Okay, so as you can see, you can go to the next slide, please. So the U.S. tax code is pretty astronomical. Each year is constantly changing and growing. There's usually a lot of different aspects that make people feel a little nervous. Years ago, people used to file their own taxes. They used to write them out by themselves, go to the post office, pick up a form, and there was their tax return. But then somewhere in the early 80s, then we all know that the changes that came in with Reaganomics, et cetera, they kept every year they'd keep making additional changes to the tax code, and it would make things harder for the average person. Even 30 years ago, people were even able to file their taxes over the telephone. You just called in, punched in a few numbers, and voila, you got your refund. But then things got a little bit more and more complex, and things got a little bit crazy. So now here we are. We're going to, next slide, please, to who's required to file. Rajan, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself on the phone, you can jump right in. But right now, these are the filing statuses. The filing status is a single. If you're single and under 65 years of age, you're required to file if your gross income is at least $12,000 and $12,950. And people are constantly asking us if they're required to file, but there's reasons why you should file even if your gross income does not meet these particular categories. But as you see here, these are the different slots. So 65 or older, 14,700. If you're head of household, of course, we can get into that a little later, but that's an adult with children that they're taking care of, or an adult that's taking care of more than half of another adult's living situation. They're taking care of a person's needs, and this includes clothing, where they're living, rent, etc. And that's the head of household. And that, of course, if you're under 65, then you should be making somewhere like 19,400, and that's your requirement to file. But of course, the filing, like we say, filing requirement is there, but you should also file anyway so you can get certain benefits. Okay, so next slide, please. So if you were born after January 1958, as we said, you should file, and these notes are what your gross income is. It's anything that comes in the form of money, goods, property, any services, and things that aren't tax exempt. You're not including your social security benefits, but we would include some gains you might have, some stocks, bonds, etc. So you should be considering that. Gambling losses, gambling winnings, you definitely must file. Sometimes people don't think if they've won the lottery that they should file for that, but you do receive a W-2G, and you do receive a form for that, and you should file every tax form you get. You should make sure you file that. So making sure that you go to your tax preparer with all of the necessary documents that you receive. You'll get a notice in the mail if it says important tax document included. Make sure you bring that, and that includes Any 1099 that you receive, that's 1099-R, 1099-DIV, or 1099 in INT, which is for interest from your bank. Even that you should bring with you because that is part of your tax record. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we were saying, if you need to file even if you aren't required. And technically, yes, you should file. You should file if you owe any taxes. If you may have owed taxes in the past. If you have had $400 in self-employment, that means like you're working for yourself. You have a small business. You've received some income from that. You should file for that. That sometimes that might be where people are a little confused and is this something that's really necessary? But yes, it's part of your tax record and you should make sure you put that you should make sure you do the right thing and claim that as well on your taxes when you go to file. And if you've earned any money from church or qualified church controlled organization, so you definitely should file that as well. If you have, say, if you're disabled, you might want to create a tax return so that you can put yourself on record and get part of the state credits as well, because a lot of times people don't realize that there are credits that they can get if they do not file. Okay, so the next slide, please. Some of the benefits that have been touted in the last few years. We're all familiar with child tax credit. We may have heard about that, the additional child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, and the American Opportunity Credit. I'll talk a little bit about those credits because these are the reasons we try to get people to actually create a tax return and get it e-filed. So if you're working, you're earning an income, you're earning some funds from a job, that's the earned income tax credit that you're eligible to claim if you are under a certain income threshold. The thresholds for families is in the mid 55,000s, and the threshold for singles is in the mid 25,000. Now, it's not necessarily fair because singles, of course, you're working and you still need to maintain a household. And we do know that we're living in times where it's kind of difficult to afford some of our own personal living. So you definitely should recognize some of these credits and what you're eligible for. Child tax credit. Recently, the child tax credit was something where the government was able to met it out over a series of months, and but then unfortunately that went away, where we're now going back to child tax credit as is during the filing season. So now you're getting a lump sum of this credit, and there's a certain threshold on that as well for a child tax credit, and who receives how much each child receives. We'll get into that a little later. And the additional child tax credit has a qualifying child, and you will be able to claim that child on your tax return, and then that would sorry, is there technical? Does anyone have any questions so far? Can I see a show of hands if there are any? Okay. Ariana, are there any questions?
We don't have any questions yet. No, not yet.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. I just wanted to make sure you could hear me. I just saw a note that I wasn't being heard. Okay, so then of course the American Opportunity Credit. That credit is something where you would be, once you're going to school for years, you will receive this American Opportunity Credit. It comes in the form of helping you it's an augmenting your desire to improve your education and to improve your life. So that's one of the credits that's helpful. It's in post-secondary education, and there's a lifetime credit as well, lifetime education credit, but that one is not necessarily something that most people are doing, because that will be if you're going to school and you are trying to do something that improves your life, and that would be towards a job or that kind of thing, things that are improving your quality of life. So that's another credit that's not listed on this particular slide. So, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm waiting for my colleague to be able to unmute himself. If he's not able to do that, I'll just keep going and then we can ask him questions at the end. Okay. So the personal income tax, employers are required to deduct federal income tax from your paycheck. You fill out a W-4 when you are employed. It's one of the first forms that they give you. Sometimes a little complicated. Sometimes we add in extra deductions that don't need to be there. Like they'll ask us how many exemptions you claim, and people will put in 6 because they're thinking, oh, you know, this is going to help me in the long run. But you really should just be as honest as possible. Put in yourself if you are a single person. If you have children, then make sure you put those in as well. But you shouldn't try to go over to get more money back in your check as your, you know, for your biweekly check. You want to make sure that you put the proper amount in so the right amount is taken out of your paycheck. And then by the time the tax time comes around, you will be able to receive that money back or some of that money back, depending on what your tax situation is. That's always been something that's been a little mystery to people, like how do they determine this? But sometimes we have people come to us to get their taxes done and they've chosen to withhold a lot more than they should, and then they're confused as to why their refund is lower, or you know what's going on with this, and it's a lot of times because they put in the wrong thing in on their W-4. So that's helpful knowledge actually. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I have a question. So if there are people out there who've had a paid preparer, have you had any circumstances where you felt like you were being gouged a bit? And if so, what was your steps to actually combat that? Show of hands, anyone?
Yeah, feel free to drop those responses in the chat. If you're comfortable, the chat is
No.
on for everybody. You can raise your hand as well, whatever is most comfortable for you guys.
Thank you. All right. So employers are required to provide your W-2 by now. If you haven't received your W-2 by now, you should check with your HR department of your current or previous job, depending on where you are with that. So basically, your W-2 is a record of what you earned during the previous year. So you will see things on there that maybe you weren't aware that were coming out of your checks. There's things such as you'll see whether you had, like if you have a retirement plan, that'll show up on there'll be codes on your W-2 that the tax preparer will recognize and add to your tax return. You want to make sure that your W-2 is correct. You want to make sure that all of the information on there is correct. Your social security number, if they have it on there, is correct. You know, sometimes they put the entire number on. Some folks have now gone to cutting it out and just putting on your last 4. But you want to make sure that the details the address is correct, because this means that the record that the IRS has is you're aware of, because sometimes people's tax returns are rejected based on the fact that the address was wrong or different than what the IRS was expecting, or the social security number was off. We're not going to get into ITINs as much, but there's an individual taxpayer ID number that some immigrant people have, and sometimes they work under another social security number, but it's not that it's an illegal thing. The IRS recognizes this, but sometimes what ends up happening is that the 2 numbers might be used interchangeably. So on the tax return, someone uses the ITIN, but the supervisor in the person's workplace has used the ITIN. So it can be a little confusing, but that's something that you will see. You make sure that those numbers are correct and that everything that's reported on your W-2 is what you expect. You also want to make sure that you're using your W-2 to file your tax return, and definitely not your last pay stub, because sometimes things change between what you got on December 31st and what you receive on what you receive in your W-2 on January 31st. So you want to make sure that you use your W-2 to file your taxes. It may seem tempting to just say, okay, I'll just bypass or forego waiting for a W-2, or you just definitely make sure you get that W-2. And check with your, as I said, check with your HR department to make sure that everything on there is exactly what you expected. Okay. So federal taxes, they're deducted from your gross income. Gross is the full picture. Net is what you bring home, but you would then make sure that what you see on your on your paychecks from week to week or biweekly is exactly what you're expecting to take out. Now, if you want them to make changes, or if there's been changes in your family, you will go to your HR department and you will make changes to your W-4. They are aware that people well, during the year people will make changes, and you should do that if you want to see something different by before December 31st. So that would be something. You don't want to do it constantly. This is not something you're doing regularly, but this is if you have changes to, like, legitimate changes to your family that you need to share. Okay, so next slide, please. So as I was talking about the W-2, so as you know, W-2s look like what you're seeing on the screen in front of you. As you see, this Billy Does person, they earned $39,027. Sorry, my screen keeps popping off. And basically, so then the amount of federal tax you see taken out is $3,000, $3,000, about $3,000, right? So basically, once Billy goes to his tax preparer, the tax preparer is going to put this information in as he or she sees it directly, like this. So you want to make sure that when you are reviewing your tax return, that these numbers are placed in. So we start out with box B with the EIN, making sure that that is the actual number for your employer. Most tax softwares have automatically can pull forward that number. Like once they put it in, it'll have the employee, it'll link to the employer that that number belongs to. Now, this is something, it's a record that every company has an EIN. Every legitimate company has an EIN. It's similar to the company having their own social security number. It's just pretty much identifying them in that same way, the way we are identified by our social security numbers by the IRS. So then we also talk about the state ID number. So sometimes down here in box 16, the number, sometimes the numbers are the same, sometimes the numbers are different, and the same goes for what's reported as income. So the reason why we implore you to make sure you have your W-2 when you come to us is because you want to make sure that the income that was reported to the IRS reflects what goes on to your tax return. Sometimes what can happen is that we end up guesstimating. So some of the commercial vendors, the more they're trying to be our friend, but they have us say, oh, well, how much do you think you made? And sometimes we think that that's to our advantage, but that isn't necessarily so. So definitely make sure you bring a form like this to your tax preparer. Make sure you receive that from your employer. Excuse me. Okay, so we're talking about taxable wages. And so there's deductions that these are the types of things that would show up on your W-2. So it's just what you received, and it doesn't include this includes everything that you receive, the wages, tips, etc. And you want to be sure that these types of that it's exactly what you're expecting. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting a little parched. Excuse me. Okay. So let's go to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So something to watch out for is tax-related identity theft. So whenever you are asked by your tax preparer if you've ever been the victim of identity theft, sometimes people assume that identity theft is specific to credit card fraud. But in this case, we're talking about people who use other folks' social security numbers to file taxes. And this does happen occasionally. Excuse me, about 10 years ago, there was a spate of folks just showing up to get their taxes done and being told, oh no, that's already been filed. You already filed. And they were surprised because how is that possible? So not only can your social security number be used to file, but sometimes people's children's social security are used. So basically, sometimes your personal identifying information can be out there in a way that you may not know. But particularly as it relates to the IRS, what you would do is you would request a PIN, an IRS, an IP PIN. So that would actually cover, that would show that you had some kind of IRS related theft in the past, identity theft in the past, but it would make sure that you have to do a few things to continue to make sure that your identity is protected. So with this IP PIN, you request this from the IRS. There's several ways to do it. You can go on irs.gov and request the PIN. You let them understand what happened, why you're requesting this PIN, but you can most of us can get an IP PIN. In the past, it was specific to identity theft, but now that they recognize that more and more people are feeling a little vulnerable and want to make sure that they're protected. But each year, you have to request a new PIN. Once you've requested an IP PIN, you must do it each year. So that would be something where sometimes taxpayers come to us and they have had an IP PIN in the past, but they either forgot that they had it or they use the old PIN and then the return gets rejected. And that's something that we try to avoid, making sure that folks actually have the PIN. So we try to give people a heads up. If you've had it in the past, please come to us with a new PIN. It's always going to come in the mail. No one's going to call you and give you the PIN over the phone because the IRS does not call anyone. Make sure you understand that, please. The IRS will not call you and ask you for anything. They will not call you and ask you for your social security number. They will not call and ask you for your IP PIN. They will not call you for anything. As soon as you hear someone saying, hey, I'm calling from the IRS, hang up. That's not a legitimate call. Okay, so make sure that if someone has used your identity in the past to file a tax return and you do have an IP PIN, you're now responsible for mailing in your tax return. It's not something where it can be e-filed, but this is for your benefit. You want to make sure that they want to make sure it's you. You want to make sure that you're legitimately being represented. So we encourage you to, if you do choose to get an IP PIN and you haven't been a victim of identity theft, IRS related identity theft, that's fine too. But just remember that you have to stay on top of getting a PIN each year. And it's pretty simple. Just look out for the mail. Make sure your address is correct. When you're applying for your PIN, make sure that you put down the proper address that you want it to come to. If you live in an apartment building, sometimes mail gets lost, so you want to be on top of that. So yeah, so that's just where we stand with the IRS, the IP PIN. So if you go to your local VITA center and they ask you what's your IP PIN, you will let them know, yes, I was a victim of identity theft, or no, I just chose to get a PIN for my own security. And here it is. This is the letter that I was sent, and we will add that number into your record. Okay, next slide, please. So the next slide, this represents the tax form that you would be filling out. So I'm not sure the age group of everyone on this call, but like I said, 30 years ago, people were picking up these types of forms from the post office, going into the post office and filling out something that looked just like this, and a booklet came with it. Now, even though we're not filling these out anymore and everything's done online, or the tax preparer sees a form similar to this. Excuse me. So basically, when you fill out the intake form at the VITA program center or even the commercial vendor, everything they get from the form is based, excuse me, everything they get from your intake form is based on this tax form. This is the most common tax form that's used, the 1040 or the 1040 EZ. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but it was even simpler than this. This form is about 2 pages long. And basically, this is your record for the year. So on this form, they're asking about your filing status. Filing status, single. Single is not married. This is not, if you're, this means you have no children, you're by yourself, you're child free, you're fine, but you're child free. Excuse me. Married filing jointly. Married filing jointly is for folks who are legally married under the eyes of the law. Now, we know that sometimes we're strongly in love with our partner. We don't need a piece of paper to define us, that kind of thing. And that's fine. That's completely fine if you're spiritually married. However, the IRS will not necessarily consider you married unless you have a piece of paper from the state that you live in that says married. So your marriage license, you have to have a marriage license, and that's married filing jointly. You and your spouse must come together to a tax site because both of you need to file, you need to sign off on a tax return. Married filing separately. Marriage filing separately, people can be married. They're perfectly happy together, but they file separately because maybe one of the spouses has some kind of issue with their own tax return, or with their income or with their finances. So it's more advantageous for the other spouse sometimes to file separately. Um, it's not the best tax filing status. There's a lot of credits you do not receive because of this. So we tend to ask people to consider the other types of things that they can get, such as injured spouse or those types of things that they can file towards instead of specifically married filing separately. But that is a filing status that you can choose. But if you're married filing separately, and let's say if you're separated, you still need to get your spouse's social security number to put onto the tax form. Excuse me. Excuse me. There's also head of household. Head of household is one adult that's taking care of others, children, or even their parent, but it's that you're keeping more than half of the support for the other person in that you're claiming on your tax form. Now, ways that you can show that, excuse me. Now, if it's children, of course, generally that's a little simpler. You can come to the tax site with your children's social security cards. If you're claiming for a parent, the parent does not have to live with you, but you have to show how you are providing more than half of their support. And then, of course, excuse me, there's qualifying widower. So qualifying widow or widower, basically, if our spouse passed away during the course of the last tax season, that's something that you can also add in because you're also going to file for, excuse me, for their W. Pardon me. Okay. So those are the filing statuses. But the most advantageous if you're married, of course, like is married filing jointly, and married filing separately. Again, there's a lot of tax credits that you do not receive for that. Of course, the rest of the form is pretty simple. It's just the typical stuff: your name, your last name, these types of things. Like if you're filing for yourself, like let's say if you're using a software package, you may not see it in this manner. You will probably have a click through, which is simpler to fill out. And then all of this stuff will go you'll probably see this at the end of your session while you're filling out your own taxes. Now, let's see. Excuse me, I am so sorry. My throat is so dry. But Now we can go to the next slide.
So this will begin the portion that is going to be covered by Tamara, which is going to be important deadlines and tips for the tax season.
All right.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Ariana, and thank you, Makila. That was loaded. So much information. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask after the presentation. And also feel free to reach out to Senator Persaud's office, Grow Brooklyn, and Brooklyn Legal Services Corp. A. So now I'm going to get into important deadlines and tips. Next slide, please. Here are the important dates. Tax filing season is officially open January 23. IRS and New York State Department of Taxation began processing returns, and they're accepting it now. And as the senator mentioned, file your returns as soon as you can. We have seen a number of cases of fraud, and we represent a number of taxpayers whose information was used to claim credits and refunds, and they just find out about it, a year later after receiving a deficiency notice from the IRS and New York State that says you were not entitled to a $5,000 refund. Now you have to pay it with interest and penalties. So now that $5,000 tax bill is like $8,000, and it grows interest every day. The deadline to file your tax returns is April 18th. Both IRS and New York State. That means everyone needs to file your taxes on or before April 18th. Life happens though, and sometimes you just cannot file your taxes. If that happens, you need to file for an extension on or before April 18th. That will give you an additional 6 months. With that 6 months, you would need to file your return by October 16 to both the IRS and New York State. Next slide, please. Tips for filing your 2022 tax returns. In order to avoid refund delays, you should always file your returns electronically with direct deposit instead of submitting a paper tax return. You want to make sure, as Makila mentioned, that you have all of your tax records, your W-2, 1099s, 1099Ks, miscellaneous, Form 1095A. Make sure you have all of those documents and you properly claim all of the income. As Makila mentioned, most of your income is taxable, and that includes your unemployment income, interest received, income from gig economy, and as well as digital assets such as virtual currency. Make sure all of your information on your return is complete and accurate. Check your name, your address, your taxpayer identification number, social security number, individual taxpayer identification number. We have a number of clients who have not received refunds because that information was incorrect. And all they needed to do right when that return was filed was to just double check to make sure all of that was correct. Next slide, please. So taxpayers can file your taxes now, but the IRS is not issuing refunds for the earned income tax credit or the additional child tax credit before mid-February. So the current law provides extra time for the IRS to review the claims to prevent fraudulent refunds. After filing, taxpayers can check the Where's My Refund link or app on the irs.gov website. So if you filed your taxes, most updates will be made by February 18th. So the IRS expects most refunds to be available through direct deposit or debit cards by February 28th. If you have any questions with the IRS, avoid phone delays and go through online resources. If you log on to irs.gov and you set up an account online, you can actually send emails to inquire about your case. You can also go to qualified taxpayers and ask questions, as well as our office. And with the VITA sites, the volunteer income tax assistance sites, such as Grow Brooklyn, you can get free tax preparation. Next slide, please. How to avoid common errors. So again, electronically filing your return actually ensures greater accuracy than mailing your return. When your return is electronically filed, if there are errors, it will automatically be flagged. So you might see a situation where you can't process your return, or the system is detecting like an error, your return will not go through. Again, make sure all of your information is correct, and make sure your dependents' information is correct, their taxpayer identification numbers, their names. And again, make sure you review your tax return after, you review your tax return before signing. So if the IRS or New York State sends you a tax bill and you have no idea what it was for, let's say somebody prepared your return, or your spouse prepared your return, and you just signed the return without reviewing it, and it was actually very incorrect. If you get a tax bill, the IRS will use as a defense, listen, we have your signature. This is your signature. So you reviewed it. There's an assumption that you reviewed it. Make sure you do that. And if you're getting a refund, make sure to double check those account numbers. We've seen so many clients whose tax refunds actually went into somebody else's account, and those are extremely difficult to correct. It's extremely difficult because you will not find a lot of people who accidentally received that refund saying to their bank, I received money, here it goes back to you, IRS. Usually people will just shut their mouths and they're going to say, oh, there's money in my bank account, that's mine. And always make a copy of the return and all of the schedules for your own records. If you have any questions or if any issues come up, you have that record to refer back to. And if you come to Grow Brooklyn, or you come to Brooklyn A, or seek assistance from Senator Persaud's office, we have that information that can help us help you. Next slide, please. How to apply for an extension. So I mentioned that deadline in April. If you can't apply for it, get that extension. File the extension with the IRS by completing 4868 application for automatic extension of time to file the U.S. individual income tax return on or before April 18th. You can also electronically file that document on the irs.gov website. And for New York State, you would need to complete IT 370, application for automatic 6-month extension of time to file for individuals. You can also apply for that online on tax.ny.gov. So an extension of time to file your return does not grant any extension of time to pay your taxes. So if you owe, you should pay the estimated amount that you owe your taxes by the regular deadline to try to avoid penalties as much as possible. Next slide, please. So now that was just a little bit of tidbit of helpful hints. I am going to refer back to Ariana because now we're going to give you descriptions of the services we offer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Farah, and thank you, Makila, for that first part of this evening, which was just the general information for filing requirements and important deadlines. And now we're going to get into the actual IRS programs that both of these organizations are part of. That is the VITA program and the LITC program. So we're going to go over the VITA program, the services that are provided, and the eligibility, and then we're going to hop over to LITC covering the exact same topic. So I'll pass it over to Makila for this part.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, so the VITA program was created by the IRS in 1971. Now, I want to share with you a bit about the history of VITA. Why? Because I'm proud of the history of VITA, and I wasn't there. But I love the fact that some of the IRS employees, and I've met some of these people, they took their own time. And these are people who were like receptionists, people who were the cleaners, people who just did normal jobs that weren't auditors. They weren't people who were great with numbers. They weren't accountants, but they took time to go into different communities that weren't actually receiving a lot of services or weren't able to file and weren't getting credits that they deserved because they just weren't filing tax returns. So they took tax forms, they went into churches, they went into libraries, they went into community organizations, and they helped people file their returns. Back then, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, I'm getting my get back money," because they weren't getting this stuff before. They just weren't involved in filing taxes. But I've met some of these people and they talked about how great it was to be able to serve. So that was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And some of these folks are still working at the IRS. Now they're in what's called the SPEC program. And in SPEC, what they do is they help to engage community partners around the country to help in low to moderate income communities to make sure the tax credits go out to everyone. So basically the VITA program was the reason why it's called volunteer income tax assistance, because they were volunteers. They worked at the IRS, but they volunteered in the community. And even though we are all of their partner organizations, such as Grow Brooklyn, and you'll see a lot throughout the rest of the city that are part of the NYC Free Tax Prep Coalition, even though they grant from the city, they give us a grant to run the program, we are still considered volunteers to the IRS because we're helping to advance the credits within the communities. And so, but I'm a proud volunteer of the IRS. So basically, part of my role is to help you understand what's going on with your taxes and to help you file free, accurate returns and making sure that you get your credits, all the credits that you're legally entitled to. So then we also help you at the sites to enroll in savings programs. If you want to get savings bonds, we help you with that with your tax return. There's an 8888 form that, I should say, yes, there's everything in the IRS is about forms. Every publication, even name tags are forms. But there's a form 8888. Make sure the tax preparer is aware of that. And let's say you want to split your refund between getting it into several bank accounts. If you have a bank account for each child and you want to put a little something in there, make sure that your tax preparer is aware that you know about the 8888 and you want to put each child's bank account number on there. You can also purchase a savings bond. We can also help you get 529 accounts for your children from the state. So basically what that is that you want your children to go to college, you want to help them save, and even if they're very young, you want to make sure that you're able to get the information about these. And that's something that we can talk with you about, as well as other types of FEEB services, which is financial empowerment and asset building services. So that means that you are a person who are making under $80,000 in the city. That's a family. But if you're an individual, we fought for this so that individuals can also get the VITA services without any complications. And that's people who are child free and they're making under $56,000 a year this time. And this is so we can make sure that you're getting credits that you deserve. Specifically, parents who are, you may have children and you may not know where to turn. You're not necessarily making a lot of money, but here you are, you can get your child tax credit. You're working, so you'll definitely be able to get your earned income tax credit. So sometimes when you're filing your own taxes, you may not know where to put the information on the forms or on even in when you're typing it in one of the commercial softwares. So we help you with that. We use a program called TaxSlayer. You may be seeing commercials about this. The IRS purchased this program for all of the community organizations to use, and we use this throughout our sites. Grow Brooklyn has 11 sites this season, and we also have a virtual program. So we work with Code for America, which has a platform called Get Your Refund. And if you see any emails from getyourrefund.org, it is legitimate. And that is a free tax prep filing service that we use to help you with both the in-person appointments that you can do at any of our sites. What you will end up doing is you'll be sitting with a preparer who will go through your tax Well, we'll start from the beginning. You sit with an intake person, they do an interview with you to make sure that you have all of the correct documents you need. So you come to the tax site, you must bring in your social security number, your social security card, I should say, and the social security card for everyone else that you're claiming on your return. So if you have 2 children, you should bring in 3 or 4 social security cards, you and your spouse, and the 2 social security cards for your children. We need those because the IRS wants to make sure that you are who you say you are. These kids are yours, and you are claiming these are legitimate claims. We've had stories from people saying that, yes, the commercial vendor had me give my cat a social security number, and they put that on my form, and then I got audited. And of course, as Tamara was saying, what happens? You sign off on that return with that vendor. You're responsible for everything that's on there. So if they make up things and they make up stories and they tell you, oh, borrow a kid from your friend, yeah, you're responsible for that. So you have to be sure that you bring all the right documents with you, and we make sure of that. So, sometimes people may feel like we're picking on them, but no, we're doing this because we have to make sure that we're keeping you out of trouble. And that's our pleasure to do that. So once you sit with the intake specialist, they'll go through all of your documents and make sure that everything is fine. You'll then sit with the tax preparer who is IRS certified. When we say that they're IRS certified, they've been through several tests. Now, yes, some of them are actual volunteers that are volunteering their time, but they have been trained by IRS certified training. It's the agents that are certified, and also it's not like this test is something we make up just to get people in the door, which some commercial vendors do, but these are actual tests that have been created by the IRS. So you must complete these and you must get certified by that. And once that's done, that preparer prepares your return based on all of the information you've given us on our intake form. And then they'll ask you a lot of the same questions that you've been asked by the intake person, but that's fine. We're patient, we can get through this. And then once that is done, once they've finished typing in all their information, they'll call someone over, because every single return that's prepared at a VITA site must be quality reviewed. Why is that? Because we want to make sure that you do not suffer by someone saying, oh, I put in the wrong numbers. Now you're getting audited. Who wants that, right? We want to make sure that when you get your refund, that you don't have to see us again for another year. We want to make sure that you are fine. You don't have to end up at you don't have to end up with a lawyer. You don't have to end up answering any questions, any letters. We want to make sure that you are able to just get your refund, get your tax credits, and enjoy your life for another year. So that's something that you'll find with our tax sites. Okay, another program that we have is the self-employed tax program. That's very new. In the past, we've been able to help self-employed folks who are cash earners. What we do, we steadily do about 10% of our taxpayers are self-employed. This year, we're expanding our services. So not only will we be able to file your taxes, but we will be issuing series of workshops throughout the course of the year. And it's a year-round program now, where we will help you with your quarterly filings. We'll also help you to learn how to do your own bookkeeping, because a lot of times people who are self-employed or small businesses or have small businesses, you're not sure what to do. You're not sure of how to keep your records. You're not sure of which things are important. So we have a team of people, and we're one of five organizations that was selected to run this program, and hopefully next year there'll be another 5, and so on and so forth. The IRS has helped to craft this program in conjunction with the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. So you'll be seeing the banner a lot now. Once you see the NYC Free Tax Prep banner out there, you'll also be seeing the self-employed tax program as well with it. And with that, you're getting the EA, the enrolled agent, to help out. Enrolled agent is a person who knows tax law from backwards and forwards. They know tax law like you would not believe. So you definitely will have a friend to walk you through this, and they will help you get the best, to keep the best records and be one of the best self-employed cash earners out there, you're going to definitely be armed with all the knowledge you need to continue your business and be
Hi,
able
Michaela.
to. Hi.
I just want to again recognize Senator Persaud, who is
Ooh.
going to be signing off. But thank you again, Senator Persaud, for joining us this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, everyone. Great information. I look forward to the next 2 sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Bye-bye. I'm sorry for eating into her time. So basically, so we do have those 2 programs, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program and Self-Employed Tax Prep. So we look forward to seeing you at one of our tax sites. You can request an appointment from growbrooklyn.org/free taxes. You can give us a call, but it's easier to do your appointment online. It's easier to get through. There's so many people calling in, and we don't want to miss your call. So you can make your appointment online. You can also get your taxes done virtually, but you can definitely get them done at a tax site as well. Tax sites are all around Brooklyn. Not sure if you can read this, I'm sorry, but I can tell you where they are. We have tax sites in Bed-Stuy. We have 4 tax sites in Bushwick. The Bushwick tax sites, they're operating in the evenings, 6 to 9, so that we can get you after you finish your job. The one in Bed-Stuy operates on the weekend. Downtown Brooklyn, that operates during the weekdays and on the weekend and on Saturday, on a Sunday, sorry. We're also at Brooklyn Borough Hall with our new borough president, who has brought us back in, which is wonderful. East New York, we are in Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation, working out of their community room. But you'll see this once you go online. Again, growbrooklyn.org/free taxes, and you will definitely be able to utilize one of those options by making an appointment for any of these tax sites, or you can use our drop-off service in Brighton Beach. That again, we can talk you through how to do that. We also have contactless through our virtual service with Get Your Refund. I mentioned them before. And also, one other thing is we have the facilitated self-assistance. Facilitated self-assistance, you would just respond to a link on the Grow Brooklyn website. It comes to us in an email. It says, I would like the link to free file. And we will send you a link so that you will be able to file your taxes yourself. And then you can call us if you have questions. So there's several ways to do this. You can be in person. You can do the drop-off service where you don't have to sit with the tax preparer, or you can be contactless where you're doing the virtual exchange of your documents, or you can do the facilitated self-assistance where you get the link, you start your taxes on your own, and if you have a question, then an IRS certified volunteer tax preparer can assist you over the phone. All right, so those are our services, and there's our information. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. And we are very appreciative of our partnership with VitaSites. You know, as Michaela mentioned, VitaSites are free tax prep services. They are reliable and trusted source for preparing tax returns, which leads me into low income taxpayer clinics. Brooklyn Legal Services Corp. A's low income taxpayer clinic, next slide, please, offers tax legal representation for anyone who has legal issues with the Internal Revenue Service or New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, which includes, but is not limited to, anyone who has any type of balance owed from, or has needs assistance with filing delinquent tax returns, assistance with requesting an abatement of a penalty and interest, if you received a notice of deficiency, if you've received a denial for the earned income tax credit, and this includes an examination, verification, and recertification. We also represent taxpayers who are filing petitions in tax court and are going through litigation. We also assist taxpayers with innocent and injured spouse relief. For anybody who's being audited, we provide free legal representation, as well as anyone who owes taxes and has collection issues including liens and levies, as well as appeals. So this is just a snapshot of some of the legal services that we handle. There was a mention of fraud. We represent a number of taxpayers who have been victims of identity theft, and we have been able to successfully get all of those tax balances wiped out due to the fraud. We also assist taxpayers with collections, as I mentioned, and an example of a success story is a taxpayer who was on fixed income, owed money to the IRS in New York State. We were able to settle those balances for $1 each. So just a tidbit of some of the work that we do. If you need legal services, you can give us a call at 718-487-2300 or send an email at info@bka.org. Again, we work with VitaSites. So VitaSites are there to help prepare your taxes properly. But for those whose taxes are not prepared properly, and if you have an issue with the IRS in New York State, you can come to our office and we provide free legal services. Next slide, please. Here is so in order to get free legal services, there are income guidelines. So the income ceiling is 250% of the federal poverty guideline. So for a household of one, if your income is within $36,450, we are able to provide you with free legal services, and that increases as the size of the family household increases. There are cases where we are able to accept it if the income is over income. So please feel free to contact our office if you do have any questions. And that's about it. There's our information. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact Grow Brooklyn Legal Services Corp. Senator Persaud's office if you forget this information. And I'm going to pass it to Ariana.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. That was so much information for so many different groups of people who could really benefit from it, whether it's going to be your first time filing taxes this year, whether you have a new filing status that you're filing under for the first time this year, if you just started a business this year. Like, there's so many different groups of people that can find this information really, really, really helpful. So thank you both for providing this information for all of us. I do want to just, before we hop into the Q&A, I do see we have one question in the Q&A. I know some people don't always like to stay for the Q&A, so I do want to address the contact info here. As you can see, we have BKA's, Brooklyn Legal Services Corporation, their contact info on this side. We have their 2 locations. If you do not have internet access, an email and website wouldn't work for you, or if you don't have access to a phone, the phone number wouldn't work for you. Their locations are down there as well. For the Grow Brooklyn info, I do want to add the disclaimer that we do not accept walk-in appointments at this location, but if you come to this location, somebody will be able to assist you with setting up that appointment. So I just want to make sure we put that disclaimer out there that walk-ins are not accepted at that location. But if you'd like to set up an appointment, the way of setting up that appointment is almost seamless. Our team worked really, really hard, and their efforts are shown in the appointment page. It's very user-friendly. So yes, you can also call the number that's on your screen to set up an appointment, send an email to that email address. But yes, now while we hop into the Q&A, I do want to let everybody know the chat and the Q&A function are live. If you have any questions at all, even if in your mind they come across as ridiculous, we won't view them as ridiculous. Every question is a good question. But Wendy asks, is there an age limit that someone doesn't have to file taxes? Whoever like to, Tamara, Makila, whoever would like to answer that. That's a really good question. Thank you, Wendy.
That's a great question. And the answer is if you have earned that amount of income that is required for an individual to tax, the general rule of thumb, and Makila can correct me, is that you have to file. Because there's thresholds. So if you earn a certain amount of income, you have to file. So it doesn't matter how old you are.
Exactly.
That's a great question. Thank you for the supportive comments in the chat as well. We appreciate those. I do want to take the time, give me a couple of seconds just to type it in. But This is part one in a two-part series. I'm going to also use this time where if people are typing out their questions, I'll give you guys time to type them out. But yes, this is part one in a three-part series. And I want to drop the registration link in here in case you selected to only register for part one, or if you would love to share the love with your community and send them towards this event for part two and part three. We'll be talking about a lot of different important topics like the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, worker classification, self-employment obligations, and a lot of different other topics that could be really, really helpful for people in different tax situations. Wendy asked, what's the threshold?
The income threshold?
I believe so. Wendy,
Ariana, would you mind going back a couple of slides? Is that possible?
Yes,
It's
me
slide number 3. No, I think.
Sorry, which slide was it? Or what's
Go
the content?
It's it's who is required to file. I believe she's asking about the threshold for filing, but if she's asking about the threshold for being able to use a free VITA site, is $80,000 or less as a person with a family, or $56,000 or less as a child-free person. That's in order to get into a VITA site. But I believe Wendy's asking about the income requirements. So here again, if you're single and you're at least 12,950 and you are under 65 years of age, then you're required to file. So these are the income thresholds here. I hope this is what she was referring to.
Yeah, Wendy, if you would like to add more context to your question or just a little more information, then the Zoom will stay up to give you that time to type that out. But yeah, any last minute things that we want to add in before we close out, closing remarks and thank yous about tax season or anything, a sneak peek to part two, anything like that we want to share with anyone?
Sign up for part 2 and part 3. Tons and tons of information. Get that information while you can. Take advantage of the VITA sites, Grow Brooklyn. Contact Grow Brooklyn. Get your taxes done.
Yes. Wendy added some clarification. She said, no, I was asking about the threshold. The other young lady stated, my mom is 89 years old. I believe it has something to do. Are we talking the LITC possibly?
Yes. If you could go back to that slide. There's the so it's going to be the first column. So for a household of 1, your income is on or below, at or below 36,450. For a household of 2, 49,300. But even if your mother's income is higher, please contact us. We are able to accept some cases that are over income, and we definitely will give you as much information and advice as possible.
Yes, Wendy says thank you, and as do I. Thank you so much for answering that question. But yeah, just one last chance to take a screenshot or screen grab of this information while we're here. And while we do that, I just want to say thank you so much. Yes, you're welcome. Someone said thank you in the chat. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight and joining us and engaging with us and sitting here and listening to all this information, taking all this information in. Because if you're a low-income taxpayer, you should know that you have advocates that are here that are willing to work with you in dealing with the IRS, because everybody knows it can be a little bit intimidating, right? Like the IRS, it's intimidating. So having advocates that are there to help you is really important. That's why the work that BKA does with LITC is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important that people know about VITA services, because you can save a lot of money, and money that can be spent on growing your savings, paying for rent, paying for other utilities and necessities that are really important. That's money that you could be keeping in your pocket, and also knowing that it's important to file your return to get your refund, find out if you're eligible for credits and deductions and all of that. So yes, I want to say thank you to Tamara for her portion of the presentation. Thank you to Makila for her portion of the presentation. They were both amazing. And even though she's logged off, many, many, many thanks to Senator Persaud for joining us tonight and, you know, showing up and supporting the community as she always does. We really, really appreciate that. And last but not least, thank you again to all of you for coming. I hope everyone has a great night. I hope everyone was able to register for part 2 and part 3, and we hope to see you at part 2 and part 3. If you're traveling home, travel safely and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you, Ariana.
Of course.